This is Woke Bros, which is a weekly show that I do with my great and dear friends, Wozni Lambre, Big Waz, who you're very familiar with, Nando Vila, who you should be familiar with as well. I do the show with these two gentlemen, and we decided this week we would assemble as one on TMBS. I'm actually shocked we haven't done this before. How you guys doing?
Doing great, man. This is exciting to be amazing on the big show.
Yeah, you guys got called up to the main show.
Varsity. Like it's like when you got called up to varsity, you know, when the guy got injured and you're like the best player on JV, but you know, you get called up to varsity.
Or like Mike, who left basketball, played AA baseball, and what is inevitably headed to the major leagues, or at least that's what the documentary would have us all believe, that he was destined for stardom in baseball if the lockout didn't happen.
Let's just get to, I was going to wait, but fine. Let's just talk about it. We've already talked about it. The Last Dance is incredible.
Yeah.
I agree.
Nuts how good that is.
Well, you know what? Go ahead, Waz. No, you go ahead.
Well, no, it's nostalgia porn, right? And
definitely.
It plays on somebody like me who in 1998 was 11 years old and still was, I wasn't jaded. And so I still believed in things like superheroes and perfect people. And Michael Jordan was all of that, right? Like this want to be like Mike. It sounds cliche and corny now, but back then, no, literally, like the idea that I would smoke or drink or do drugs or do any of that stuff, like while being a hooper, I was like, I can't smoke weed. Michael Jordan doesn't do that. Like literally, like, of course your parents and all of these people always tell you, do this, do that. No, like for me, it was like, nah, Mike did this, that, and the third to become a great hooper. That's how you do it, right? Like you saw Mike as a deity. And for me to like sort of transport myself back in time into a time when I was just a young, bushy-tailed 11-year-old just obsessed with the NBA. For that alone, I'm thankful.
Yeah, someone once told me that nostalgia is the most powerful force in the universe after compound interest. This was like a nostalgia shot of heroin into your veins, like it was amazing. And the whole time, the thing that I couldn't stop thinking about while watching it was how the 90s were such a time where there was much more of a monoculture, like the internet really shattered kind of the idea of a monoculture.
Yeah.
But this event, The Last Dance, as a media event in the middle of the pandemic has felt in a way like one of those rare unifying things. Like everyone has watched it. It dominates the conversation for weeks. It kind of brings back that phenomenon of the water cooler. The next day at work, everyone is talking about whatever happened the previous night on television, right? Which has
and a positive monoculture too.
Yeah,
like in terms of that, it's exciting and it's great to watch and it's making people get re-engage with a lot of different things. But you know what I actually remembered, because I watched the Bulls when I was a kid too. We're all about the same age. And I played basketball and I was pretty good. And I remember, and I don't think that was like my main, like I probably had more like tennis fantasies or whatever, but anytime during the NBA or college season, I had the fantasy of whatever sport was on at the time, whether it was baseball or basketball or whatever. And I think even at that age, you already, you're like, yeah, that's like, I'm not going to be Michael Jordan. Right? I'm not a crazy child. But I remembered, and I got this real wave of nostalgia because even though I follow Steve Kerr, watching him coach the Warriors, I remembered, I swear, and it really hit me Sunday night with the latest one. It was like, Steve Kerr was who I was watching because I was like, there's my plausible path.
Yeah, he's the white guy.
I was like, I can be that dude. He's lanky. He's got a good jump shot.
Also, man, and that's the thing about the doc too, is that
But that's how powerful it is, though, that anybody could find. Even with
I love that Steve Kerr admitted that his idol was John Paxson. the other white guy. That was like an incredible moment.
Steve Kerr tells the story, and I think it informs his coaching style. Like, he talks about what it's like to be a role player. He talks about like not thinking he was ever going to the NBA literally until he got there. And that informs sort of his worldview. But like, he's always been kind of realistic about the kind of player that he was or the kind of player that he could be. Like, he was like, I'm not going to even be a John Stockton. Not to say even like that, because John Stockton's clearly one of the greatest players of all time and all of this stuff. But Steve Kerr's self-awareness shown through. And the story that they told about his dad out in Lebanon, basically, died for this shit, this American shit, like literally died for it. And they didn't talk about it in the documentary either, but his grandfather did missionary work in the Middle East as well, like saved a bunch of Armenians during the genocide and all of that. Like, Steve Kerr comes from a crazy family, right? And you don't think about him as such. You think about him as this Southern California surfer dude. And he's got so much depth and all of that. I don't know. I just loved seeing all of this stuff. And
I love that footage. Can I just say that footage of Michael, who, and as Steve Kerr said, he's like, Michael's aware of the cameras at all times. He's constantly, so he's there, at the timeout.
Yeah, that was an incredible
cup
moment.
In his mouth, and he's like got the cup in his mouth. He's like, I'm gonna find you, Steve. Like, and Steve Kerr's like, I'll be ready. Yes, I'll be ready. I'm there.
Just like an eager, like that's like a common thing these days, like earnest. Covering your mouth, like he's like, yeah, Mike, you give me the call.
Put me in, coach.
Oh no, it's deeper than that. It's like, wait a second, like Mike, trust me for the jumper.
The other thing that I noticed in the last two episodes that like really hit home, because this was a thing that used to get talked about a lot, was the basketball was like a game for black people, but everyone in the crowd was white. And the footage of the crowd in Indiana and in Utah, every single person is white going, you motherfuckers! Fuck you!
In a lot of ways, man, in this doc, because of the length of it, because of the way so many people were attracted to it in culture, gets compared to the OJ doc. And obviously this is much different, right? Like, OJ didn't executive produce the OJ doc. You understand? So OJ,
he was delusional enough, actually, at the end of watching that doc, I'm like, OJ would produce that same doc.
or he would produce, now let's find the real killers doc. You know what I'm saying? Like,
now you've been educated on racism. Let's find out who really did it.
But I just think it's cool that this doc, even though it's not as explicitly political, racial as the OJ doc was, which is like, the premise is like, if you dive headfirst into Uncle Tomery, you might become a mass murderer, right? Like, that's literally the premise.
That's the best description of that documentary I've ever heard.
That's the log line. That's the best log line I've ever heard.
If you embrace Uncle Tomery, like, you might become a killer, like, straight up and down. But like, that's what I think is cool about the MJ thing, is that race and American culture and politics is sort of the subtext of all of it, right? Like, you guys are like, they're not talking about the crowd in Indiana, but basketball is such, like, it's so visceral. It's like, God damn, this is crazy. So like, I was struck by that Indiana shit, and Mike's kids finally coming on the dock to say that their mom told them, you're not going to Utah. Right. Y'all black asses ain't going to Utah. No.
No, and then Obama at the end comes out and says, like, well, let me be clear. MJ made it okay to be black around the world as an American, and that's his legacy.
But I mean, Obama, the thing that strikes me is that if you go back to that 2008 Obama campaign as an advertising project, I mean, they actually got one of the Bulls' main announcers, I think, for either Chicago radio or in stadium, but like a local institution, the same guy who'd bring the Bulls out. They got him to cut a similar version for Obama. They used the Bulls entrance music for Obama. And again, I think, and I actually think that model of, because it is a black man, it is a direct confrontation just because of literally what it is against a certain type of racism and a certain type of exclusion and a redefining of what quote unquote mainstream is. But I think, Obama flows from Jordan in the sense that it's the visual is it.
No
like
question.
There isn't question. It's just like, right. And, and here I am. And,
right down in the first
the advertising is, yeah.
The first episode that Barry shows up and he's like, yo, man, like you could be the shit as long as you don't rock the boat. Like right. He literally gives the game away. Like he says the quiet part loud. Like, when we all remember his campaign in 2007 and 2008, where he literally would not acknowledge that he was black. He would, use black church like sort of cadences. He'd talk about liking Jay-Z. He would tiptoe tap dance around the subject because he knew. And I think that was so cool, Mike, that you mentioned that in the doc, that they draw the direct line from Michael Jordan to Barack Obama. And of Definitely. Course, a lot of Mike's contributions culturally, and even if you want to call it politically, is that he is the first one. He is the one that you plastered on Wheaties and Gatorade and Hanes commercials. Like he's the first black athlete that became just a global.
What about those Nike numbers?
I mean,
that's insane. They anticipate. I don't even remember. It was some type of like, hey, if we get $2 million of revenue, right? Oh, okay, here's 60.
Right.
In 1 year.
Yeah.
Before he's even won a championship.
Dude, and you think, and of course, Nike is one of those things, like something for me, why this shit resonates on so many levels. I remember, having a conversation with a black woman friend of mine, and she was explaining to me why it's like, the beauty standards is so fucked up, and like they tell us our hair doesn't look good, they tell us our skin tone and this and blah. And I just remember thinking to myself, shit, man, I always had Mike. Like these things never entered into my own psyche. Like the idea that you couldn't be cool or desirable or beautiful, like it never crossed my mind because Michael Jordan was everybody's idol. Like these are the things that he actually affected. And you think about to this day, my own obsession still with Nike and sneakers. It's all Mike. It's incredible, man.
Like everyone is talking about. Well, I mean, because I think we've talked about it before, but this idea that Michael Jordan is like this, like kind of insane, ruthless psychopath type of guy who punched Steve Kerr in the face and
he felt real bad about it.
Bullied his teammates. And, but the feeling that I was getting watching this was that, Mike, who himself doesn't seem like too capable of like personal joy, to be honest. Like it just doesn't seem like it seemed like winning was like a relief in a way. It wasn't like it was this thing that consumed him, but in a way it made me think like, he had to like sacrifice, like it's like he had to sacrifice himself for us. Like would we like think about the kind of the amount of entertainment and joy he brought to millions of other people by seeing someone so great operating at such a high level for such a long time, so consistently, that's something. It's almost like a sacrifice to the world that he gave us. That he sacrificed his own joy, his own kind of personal thing for us in a way. I mean, obviously he's rich as hell and he's fine, but like, yeah.
He says that. He's like, I tried to be a perfect person. I probably wouldn't have did it that way if I could go back to it. Like he even has his own regrets about how he handled his sort of public persona. He's like, bro, like trying to be perfect is crazy, yo. Like that shit wears on you. Sorry, Mike, I cut you off, but he says
it's perfect. I was going to say something frivolous but I'll make a serious point first, which is that that's also to me why we already talked about this and some people didn't like it, but whatever. And Waz, you wrote a really good piece about this in The Athletic about like Michael Jordan's obligations to be political or not. And you and David Aldridge talked about it on Hoops Adjacent. But I think to me, it's kind of the same principle. I mean, obviously, just that there's a million criticisms you could, okay, like Nike is the fuel of this incredible cultural breakthrough in the United States, and it's built on one of the most ruthless abusive global supply chains.
Dude, they set the standard for that.
Standard for that.
for
the
the
90s and global capitalism, and even the way like recognition and identitarian politics split from broader struggles, whether it be civil rights or economic justice. All of that is there, but that's not a personal responsibility of one man whose primary contribution to the culture is, like you guys just said, just producing such joy that he's giving us joy 20 years later in the middle of a pandemic. The frivolous thing I want to say, though, and I want your takes on this, though. He takes everything personal.
Yeah.
And it is not just, he gets pissed at his teammates. Everything is a problem. And then it's hysterical because he's super easy on Dennis Rodman. He's just like, yeah, I guess he just wanted to get paid to go wrestle. Like, I love that everything is a problem except for Dennis.
Those things fit. Those things fit for me perfectly. Where it's like Jordan had to understand what you were fully, and then if he did, and he trusted you on that front. I don't think he cared about like the sort of showy displays of effort so much as just him knowing
in somewhere big.
And like I've seen that before with like other geniuses in sport, like Maradona was the same way, like he was the same way, that he demanded a lot of you, but he didn't demand more than what you were capable of giving, if that makes sense. It was like as long as you were doing as long as he understood what you could contribute and he could rely on that in those moments, then he was fine with everything else. You know what I mean? It's like they understand the sport at such a high level. Like Jordan was probably working out computations in his head that like for us we're just incapable. Like he's like Luke Longley is like 3 inches to the left, and Steve Kerr is out on the wing, and Rodman's right here. Like, and he can like in his mind he can see all the permutations of that, and as long as you don't fuck up that permutation, he's fine with all your other bullshit.
Yeah, and you see it throughout the documentary, like, the stuff about Jordan and his teammates has been part of NBA and Jordan folklore for so long. Like, this stuff is not new to anybody who's really followed him. The stuff about punching Steve Kerr in the face, which they both acknowledged. Mike sort of liked him more afterwards, that Steve Kerr stood up to him and they had the fight, and it became, all right, this dude's not a punk. I actually messed with him. Bill Cartwright, they tell this famous story of Bill Cartwright when he first gets traded over there for Charles Oakley, and he sees Mike doing all the crazy shit, and Bill says, you try that with me, I'm going to punch you in your face. And it never happens. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Bill Cartwright's bigger than Steve Kerr.
Yeah. So there are these examples of this understanding. But Mike, you touched on something that I wanted to talk to you guys about, and I think it speaks to something deeper within the public. My man Pablo Torre did, I think he was doing the Sports Reporters in it on his parting shot. He talked about how people are making a tick of Mike's into a feature. Like this idea that like you can't possibly call your teammates bitches and hoes and not win 6 championships in 6 tries. And Pablo's just like, nah, like I think you can win 6 championships in 6 tries and not call your teammates bitches and hoes, right? Yeah. And whatever. Like that didn't seem that crazy to me. But like and I have retweeted it online, and online, like all you see is people lining up to defend Mike's right to belittle his teammates, his coworkers, which I think it just speaks to like a certain bootlicker mentality that exists in America. It's like,
it's not
Mike is the king, whatever he does works.
It's a bootlicker thing, but it's also that people take, what I got from the documentary, and now also I keep mentioning it, I'm rereading Sacred Hoops, I'm almost done with it, and obviously these are both like, they're not going to trash Mike. So that goes without saying. Course. These are frames. But one, that his relationship with his teammates to me is more complicated than was presented. 100%. So it wasn't like, oh no, he was actually a really nice guy. But also, no, he wasn't just an asshole. And actually even the reasons he was an asshole changed from the beginning of his career of like, all right, guys, watch this, to later in his career kind of being like, come on, like I need you, which is interesting. But to what you're saying was, and I just think there is a combination of hero worship in an embarrassing sense, and also that, and you see this with a million business idiots, that it's Steve Jobs and Michael Jordan are these huge permission givers for being an asshole. And it's like, it really, I could guarantee you that you don't have Mike's capacity. And as you said, you know, there's, you know, LeBron's pretty nice guy. Tim Duncan, by all accounts, is an incredibly nice guy.
Every one of his teammates love him.
Like, it's silly, and I think it's just a permission look.
Has big respect and universal admiration from his teammates? Tom Brady. People will be shocked by that, but his teammates, all of his teammates, speak glowingly of that dude. Like, straight up, everybody's like, he's the best teammate ever.
One of the things that I loved watching about the doc is
that's a white guy.
Yeah, that is a white guy. Trump supporter.
And that's a Yakubian. No, he got. I think his wife gave him a hard time about that. I think Giselle,
he's over it.
I think she pushed him back on that.
Tom Brady signed that petition to reinvestigate that case down in Georgia. He was one of the people. The NFL's like that committee that I forget what it's called, but the committee that the NFL players formed in conjunction with the league coming out of the Kaepernick shit, like they were spearheading the charge to reinvestigate those cops.
You mean the murder in
yes.
Yeah.
Tom Brady put his name on that shit, which is fucking.
Well, you know, Trump has his like handful of woke white guys like Tom Brady and Rod Blagojevich. Like, Blagojevich got out of prison. He was just like, Donald Trump's the fucking greatest. And I learned about racism in there, and I'm going to fucking end
like
that.
American History X. Yo, Laz, one thing that I noticed was like one of the games in the final. I don't remember if it was one of the games in the finals or one of the games against Indiana that went to overtime. And the final score was like 82-79 after an overtime. It just made me realize like the different NBA era of like, you know, how low scoring it was back then. You know, like Jordan was like putting up 40 points in like an 80-point game.
It's almost like a different. It's almost like you're watching something different. The amount of threes that these guys refuse to take, or even somebody like a Dennis Rodman who in today's game could only play center. He's their power forward. Like Ron Harper's not shooting at all, and like it's just a different game. The rules, like they still had the illegal defense rule in where you couldn't play zone like you can in today's game. It's just different, man. Yeah. Like the stuff that we were nostalgic for is games that ended 76-72.
I know, it's crazy.
That's halftime scores nowadays, like literally.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.